So, on today's episode, I'm thrilled to talk with an incredible singer and a songwriter, an instrumentalist, just really talented. And I'm a huge new fan of hers, and I can't wait to talk with her about her history and her music. And she has a new album releasing in December called Each Machine, and I can't wait to talk with her about it. So, all of that said, it's a pleasure to welcome Carolyn Kendrick to the podcast. How are you?
I'm so great. It's such a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I am so excited to see where this conversation goes. It seems like we have a lot in common. So
Yeah.
yeah, excited to get into it.
Yes. Yeah, me too. So what part of the world are you in today? Where are you?
So today I am in my home in Los Angeles, California. I recently relocated here like full time this year, but I've been back in California for like a couple years or a year and a half now, and yeah, so I'm here hanging.
That's great. I'm hearing that LA is like having a lot of hot weather these days. Is that still happening?
It is. It's funny, because like when I first moved here, everybody was like, "LA, hot, right?" And I was actually surprised at how temperate it was when I first moved here compared to some of the other places I've lived. But man, it has been hot as all get out lately. It has been really hot. Yeah, like today it's like 92 degrees or something, and it's October, and it does feel a bit unseasonal at this point.
Yeah, I keep hearing about that. And we'll talk. I'm going to ask you about Austin later. My son recently moved to Austin. He's 23. He got his first post college job and lives in Austin. And
Oh,
all I hear about is the heat.
I bet. I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, he says it's brutally hot. So yeah, I'm just I'm a new fan of yours. I've been listening to a lot of your previous releases, and just really am a fan of what you do, and I think more of how you do it, and just really digging all of it. I hear so many different influences when I listen to your songwriting and your singing and playing. Um, and in doing some research about you, found that you come from a musical family and a lot of different pulling from a lot of different sources, right? In terms of what styles of music.
Certainly, yes. Yeah, it's funny you should say this. Like one of my dear friends from, we grew up together, and they just sent me like a photo of a mixtape that I guess a mix CD, like a burn CD that I made for them in middle school. And they were telling me about all the songs that were on it. And I was like, there's no genre adherence whatsoever. There is like, you know, the Chicks and Janis Joplin and Miles Davis and, just kind of all of these. See, like, I guess if you don't know my parents or know like my musical background, you're like, well, how would one person even know that all these people exist in the same universe? But my dad is a jazz musician. My mom is an orchestral musician and a composer. And I grew up listening to like a ton of country music. My parents are from Texas. And so my extended family listened to a lot of country music, which is how I got into fiddling eventually. And then, as an adult, I've like really grown uh, quite deep into the, Americana, the pan Americana genre, I suppose you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I also, have gone pretty deep in like the bluegrass and old time communities as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I very similar. Yeah. You're correct when you said we have a lot of similarities and parallels. I grew up hearing a lot of Merle Haggard, Buck Owens, George Jones around the house. My dad was a big class country fan, and then got into the percussion world, and then really leaned heavily into classical music and into jazz. And I don't want to say maybe a little bit rebellious from what I was hearing growing up, but maybe there was a little bit of that. But now, as I started getting older, I kind of have veered back into really loving those great old songs again.
Yeah.
Has it been similar to that for you?
Yeah, I feel like I've always had a little bit of a push and pull relationship with like uh like what some people might call modern music versus like traditional music, you could say, or orally learned music. Um, and I like classical music is like slightly different from that, but does have some similarities with traditional musics. And yeah, I've always kind of felt like, folk music for me is this way of relating to all these generations that have come before me, and relating to generational knowledge, and relating to this like deep wellspring of emotion that, humanity has always, needed to tap into. And then but then also, I just like I love pop music, and I love like I really love like, the kind of cool stuff that technology can bring into what's going on in, mod. I keep saying, I feel like it's weird to say modern music, because like, you know, that might be a misnomer. It's just like I don't want it to be like I don't want the connotation to be modern as in there's like any superiority to it. I just mean that it's like has come into existence more recently, I suppose.
Right. I'm curious, as we're talking about modern music, what are your thoughts on the state of like technology and AI and all of that in
Mm.
music these days? Because I know there's a lot of varying opinions on it.
Yeah, I think I'm generally very anti AI. Like I think that, if like I'm very I feel very pro technology but very anti AI, I suppose. Where it seems like, if I had greater faith in our structural abilities as a society to use it for like um humanist resources, I suppose. Like I think that that could be great, but I have, no doubt that it will be used to like defund artistry in certain ways before it's used for good necessarily. But like that being said, like I don't like I think it's something we need to like very seriously think about and contend with, and like take seriously as like something that we should, probably make legislature about, and like get right with our values before it starts being implemented into our day to day. But like it's the technology is being implemented faster than we're able to like think about what we need it for, what we want it for, what would be best for it. And like, yeah, it's just the profit of it is being expedited before our values are. um but like I recently was like, oh god, actually I was in Austin hanging out with some friends at the White Horse, and it was like getting late, and I was like, oh god, my flight's in the morning, I got to figure out when I need to leave. And I like put in my info into chat GPT, and then it told me what time I needed to leave, so like that was helpful.
Well, yeah, and you're right. And there are, and I'm not gonna sit here and say I haven't used it to speed up a lot of processes in my life. It can be
Mm.
used for some good stuff. And I will tell you, and I don't know if I've told you this, that you know my other life is that I'm a technology director at an elementary
Ah,
school in St. Louis. So
interesting. Okay.
so I see and experience all of this and have these kind of conversations a lot. And I'm
Mhm.
100% with you on it, that I think that we have to do a better job trying to stay up to speed with the pace of the technology that's out there. Even
Mhm.
if we go step back and look at the legislation about streaming and paying artists the way that they're supposed to be paid, and all of that. I mean, we could talk the entire time about just that. But yeah, I'm with you on that it needs to we need to take a hard look at how we're dealing with this, because it could quickly become a much bigger problem than it may be already happening right now.
Yeah, certainly. And like this record that I just made, each machine, which is what we're talking about. A lot of the questions that I was asking while making the record were about these larger issues. Like, okay, like what is my position about where I stand in the world, about my values. What is my position about like when moral panics are happening around me? What is my position? How do I find like my own sense of identity and my own sense of trust when things are changing and you're being told more information than you can like accurately process in real time in a way that is like, like helpful. And, I think it's not just, like a lot of the questions were around like politics and religion and things like that. But, it really extends to any issue that we're dealing with in our day-to-day life, like technology and how it affects our lives and our families and our livelihoods and all that.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Yeah, I can't wait to dig in and talk with you about the new album. I have so many questions about it, and just the origin of it, of saying how you got on the path to record and curate those songs for the album, because it's a really interesting list of songs that. I mean, to say it covers a spectrum of everything from content to style to genre. It covers a lot, right?
It does. It really, it's a bit of a journey, shall we say?
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. So, as we were talking before we started recording, you and I both lived in the percussion world for a while. And I know that you, in doing some research, you played percussion, I think, when you were in school. And what was that? What were you doing, and what did you take away from that experience?
Yeah. Well, so like I was saying earlier, my dad is a jazz drummer and he's also a percussionist. And, he, like I started taking lessons from him when I was really little, kind of like from the start, like I would sing with my mom and I would play drums with my dad, and fiddle kind of came along sort of incidentally a little bit later. But yeah, just like all through school, I was always in band. I was always in marching band. I was always in jazz band. I was like, I was in Texas. So my deal was that I went to, school in California, but most of my family was living in Texas. So, on all my breaks and all my summer breaks, I would be in band camp, going to like TLU and Texas Tech band camp and like doing that whole thing, like pretty seriously. And yeah, I think it was very formative for me in the sense that like, I think, like rhythm feels like something I'm always, trying to develop a more robust relationship with, like in a musical regard, but also, like rhythm is such a starting point for all of our relationships to music. And, drumming is like some of the first music that existed on planet Earth. And I think it makes sense that it's like one of our first instincts is to like, hear something and then tap along with it. And I really love thinking about my relationship with percussion, which I kind of stopped playing drums once I got into like my like senior year of high school. And then like, I really like became a fiddle player and a guitar player after that. Like that was like my roles kind of switched. Mostly because the bands that I were playing in, like they already had drummers. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to be in a band with my friends, I need to be doing something else because somebody else already has that gig. And so it was like sort of accidental. But yeah, I find like I've been playing drums a lot more recently, actually. Like I just have you can see in my
yes, you do
in the camera, like this place that I just moved into recently, this new apartment. Like I have enough space to have a drum set in my house for the first time in like years and years and years and years. And so I've been playing drums a lot more just for fun. And yeah, it really has me like reflecting on like, what is the role of rhythm? How does it connect us to other people? What is the role of rhythm in my own music? Like, how can it move me? How can it like connect to, this sort of like this human, root that we all have, that we all share between us.
Yeah. And I would imagine even having a solid rhythmic foundation has to improve even as a songwriter. Just understanding the rhythmic structure of writing a lyric versus just it kind of being all over the place. Because you hear some songs where it's like the rhythm. You can tell it was like secondary in the process, and I'm sure it sits at the forefront as you write.
Totally. Which is, yeah, like I think a lot about, like I grew up around like a lot of really incredible like MCs and DJs who like really think about rhythm and how that, affects their lyricism and things like that. Um and yeah, like I feel like I don't think about it consciously all the time, but a lot of times when I'm like listening to a song and I'm like, this is kind of boring. It's like often because it's like, the same rhythm just over and over and over again, and there's not much variation there. But also, I think, my relationship with rhythm developed quite a bit when I was in college, when I started playing fiddle more in the bluegrass scene and old time scene, because like rhythm is approached with such reverence in those communities. And like there's no like there's not a drummer on any, like what, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the tradition, like there's no drums in bluegrass, there's no drums in old time music. There is in country music, but like, and like even somebody is going to be like, well, Jimmy Martin had a drummer, but like I know, like, so, like there are, there are exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, like there's not a drummer. And so like the fiddle player, the mandolin player, like it's this group effort to make sure that everybody is like chugging along and like plugging into each other in a way that is like a zipper, like everybody's kind of moving forward and forward leaning. And then in more, old time styles, like the rhythm of the melodies of all of that is like integral to the groove of the music. And so I think about that with pretty serious reverence. And it's like it's like a very democratic approach to rhythm. It's like not, oh, well, it's the drummer's responsibility to make sure that we're on time. And it's like, it's like, no, it's all our responsibility.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, to hear, especially in bluegrass music, how the 2 and 4 is how it's moved around, and it you hear the mandolin player, it might be with the fiddle player or even the banjo player, playing that backbeat on a song. And yeah, I think one of the things I notice a lot is musicians that start young and play melodic instruments. I get I see a lot, and I'm going to probably overgeneralize here, but that so much attention is spent on learning the notes, the melodic information, that rhythm is kind of in the background. And then you have a lot of melodic instrumentalists that are rhythmically deficient, and then they're catching up with that. And I would imagine that you probably, when you moved to fiddle, you probably had a really good head start because you had such a good foundation on playing in time, playing in the pocket, understanding all of that, and just being solid in your rhythm.
I certainly hope so. I would like to think that's true. Yeah. Although like I definitely have had, like, it's interesting because like when you, like I am somebody who like I kind of genre hop a little bit. And that I used to be kind of self-conscious about that. Now I feel like it's something that I feel like is a bit more of my identity in a way that I claim fully. Um, but like, I do think that I had a head start when I started improvising, because like it's like a bit of a pressure release valve to be like, okay, well, you don't have to like, whatever, be playing like all these crazy modes and everything. As long as you can like play something rhythmically interesting, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
And, but I will say when I move from genre to genre, like, how somebody who's playing like hard bop feels the backbeat, or how somebody is playing a Paul Simon cover plays the backbeat versus how somebody plays like a Bill Monroe tune feels the backbeat. It's all very different. And you wouldn't think that it would be, it's not foreign, but it is different. And like, I definitely have had quite a few moments where I've been like trying to get like more, acquainted and more like native with certain like language and like certain aphorisms and different genres. And like it's been hard because like I remember, for example, like I was at a jam at the Cantab in Boston, which is like this legendary bluegrass bar that has since closed. But like, and I remember being in this jam, and my friend Maddie Whitler, who is like who I adore and who also just like kicked my ass for years. She was like, I remember we were in this jam, and she was like, "You are dragging," and I was like, "I don't think I'm dragging." And but then, like after I like thought about it, I was like, oh, I think I actually am, because like the way that they're feeling the beat is like they're not rushing, but they're pushing.
Mm.
And so I was kind of always like a little bit off, And so something that's been fun, but also is challenging is like renegotiating and being respectful of the genre when you're in that genre, to be like, you know what, I'm playing for the home team. I'm going to adhere to what y'all are doing, instead of just being like, whatever, I'm just going to play my swing stuff over this.
Right. Yeah. And I play bass guitar mostly these days. Kind of moved over to bass, and it's interesting to play with musicians, and it technically may not be rushing, but it is, right? If it's sitting on the front of the beat, and it's
right.
It is interesting to play one song with one person and then play it with a different person, and it's a completely different experience, even if the tempo's the same, right? It's so interesting. Yeah,
totally. And I've been feeling this lately with like, when I play my songs with other people, like there are like a few drummers who I love, who I play, gigs with, and who play on my stuff, and every set is different when I play with a different person. It's like the music feels totally different.
Yeah, it is. How do you typically like? As a singer, do you typically like things to sit on the back of the beat a little bit? Do you find it easier to sing?
Yeah, I think, as like within my own original songs, I tend to actually to not like things on the front side of the beat as much. Like I tend to like things at least either in dead center or leaning back a little bit more. And yeah, so but yeah, that can be hard to negotiate, like with finding just like the line between dragging and or rushing versus like finding the right feel it's it's a continual thing. But I feel lucky that I know some good drummers who know how to do
Yeah.
it.
Yes, that saying, life is too short to play with bad drummers, right? I mean, that's kind of the
Certainly.
truth of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when did the fiddle make its way into your life?
So I started playing. My parents when I was, early on, they were like, "We're just going to throw Carolyn in like any musical thing she wants to do." Like I from the early on, I was like, "This is what I want to do," and they're like, "Cool, just do whatever you want, like, but try a bunch of stuff." So I was in choir, I was taking drum lessons, I was doing marching band, I was doing jazz band, but I was also like starting from like age 4 or so, I was doing Suzuki violin, which is I'm not sure if you're familiar
Mm-hmm.
with the so Suzuki violin, for those who are unacquainted, is like this pedagogy of learning classical music. Essentially, it's not all classical, but like mostly classical music that is mostly by ear, but there's also a reading element to it, and there's also a social element to it. So for example, like I would have my individual lessons every week, and then there would also be group lessons. So I grew up with like a very robust community of other kids who were learning how to play, like, whatever, Mendelssohn or whatever. So I started doing that, and it always felt like, okay, cool, I'm really good at the violin, and I really like this, and I like the social element of it, but I don't really care about this music very much. Like, it's not really my thing. It's like I like the challenge of it, but I don't vibe with the community of classical music whatsoever. And so like when I got into high school, I started playing in funk bands because that's like the only bands that I could find around. But as I said, like the bands already had a drummer, and so I became the singer. But I was like, but I want to play. Like I'm a player. I want to play. So I started playing violin in these funk bands.
Really cool.
Yeah, and just not because I was like, this is something that artistically, like, I feel like I have to do, but it just was like, well, this is just kind of was available to me, and I want to learn how to improvise, and this is what I've got. This is my option. Then when I was about 16, I went to go see a Sarah Jarosz show, and Alex Hargraves was playing the fiddle in that band at that time, and it just that show just completely changed my life, because I was like, well, okay, cool, now I know what I want to do. Like, I want to be a songwriter like her, and I want to play the fiddle like him. And so I luckily, like, I cornered him at the end of the show and, like, asked him, I asked the band for their phone numbers, and I was like, how can I do what you do? Like, I want to know more. And Alex was like, you should go to the Mark O'Connor fiddle camp. And so I did. And then I was like, oh, there's this whole world of fiddle that I could get into. And like, I learned about bluegrass. I learned about old time. I learned about, country fiddling. I learned about, Texas swing. I learned about all kinds of stuff. And that's really how I ended up getting into fiddling. And it was just kind of off to the races from there.
Yeah, I learned from Luke Bulla was on the podcast, and I didn't realize how much of a fiddling culture there is, and it just this massive supportive network of players that fiddle in competitions and conventions, and just it's amazing how everyone supports each other and just wants to play together all the time.
It's pretty incredible. It's certainly like the social element of the fiddle scene is unparalleled, I would say. I mean, there's definitely like other very cool musical communities out there. And like, it's got its problems just as everything does, but like, I've never felt more at home than in this community. And yeah, everybody's just like hungry, which I love. Like, it feels like everybody's ambitious, everybody's hungry, everybody wants to play, everybody wants to share all this knowledge that they have. And everybody's like, oh, send me that, source recording from Eck Robertson. And like, everybody's always just like into it. And I love that.
Yeah. And it seems like just cross-generational support, and you have this next wave of fiddle players that are really young, that are already coming along, and I just don't hear that very much or at all with other instruments. And maybe we talk about flat picking and a lot of bluegrass instruments. I know that happens maybe more there than anywhere else, but it just seems so deep with fiddle players.
There is definitely like the because it's like an oral tradition, and like the kind of the whole point is that like you learn by ear, you learn the songs of your grandparents, you learn the songs from other earlier ancestors and earlier generations and things like that. Like, I think there's a desire when there is a new generation to be like, okay, cool, it's your turn. Like, do you want to get into this? And, there's like the whole contest scene culture, which is like, like a petri dish for prodigies. And, I think it's just like I'm actually like, I do think that sometimes people can be a little too intense with the prodigy aspect of it. Like, I think kids should also just, be allowed to be kids sometimes, but,
right.
But that being said, like, the culture is there for people who want to get into it, including like at any age.
Yeah. It's, I think Luke was saying that I think his kids are like training to compete. I think they are taking lessons to do it. I'm like, wow,
I would
that's
not
crazy.
Be surprised. I definitely would not be surprised. I don't know Luke personally, but I've been a fan of his for forever, which is why I was so excited when I learned that he had been on the podcast before. And yeah, totally. And our mutual friend Heidi, I think her kids are also getting ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool. Yeah, I am a fan of Luke, as I am with you, because it's not you. You both speak such a wide vocabulary on the instrument, right? It's not. I can tell you pull from so many different sources when you play, and it's not just this one one thing, and then there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with bluegrass fiddle or country fiddle, but I can tell you pull from many different places.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, yeah, kind of like what I was saying earlier is I was very, very fortunate to have some very deep teachers, so some of my first for real fiddle teachers were Bruce Molsky, who's an incredible legend in the old time scene, and also Daryl Anger, who, was in David Grisman's band and has done many, many amazing projects. And like like Bruce's advice to me very often was like, I think you need to go like deeper into whatever like niche you're interested in. I think you need to go deeper into that. And I think that there is like a lot of truth to that, where it's like, these traditions are so deep that it's like, it does a disservice to them often if you just skim over it. And if you just sort of like kind of learn it, but then you're like just sort of doing it. And so, but I have just always felt so much draw to so many different kinds of music that like, I I I feel much more at home being like a bit more of a generalist than a specificist in certain regards, acknowledging that like I am not the best example of like if you want like authenticity of specific genre, like my playing's not the best place to go to, but like at this point in my career, like I kind of don't care because I can point you to the other people who do that really well, and I really enjoy being like, I gather all my ingredients and then I become soup, so to speak.
Well, you do a wonderful job at it.
Thank you.
Who are some fiddle players that who do you listen to? If you're listening to fiddle players these days, who do you listen to a lot of?
Who am I listening to a lot of these days? I've been listening to, I mean, I always go back to Bruce. Bruce is certainly an all-time hero of mine. I've been listening, honestly, like I have been actually on a bit of a like listening to fiddle break these days, which kind of for the first time in a while, but I was going through like a big transcribing of Bobby Hicks for quite a while. That was, I love Bobby Hicks. And like I always go back to like Johnny Gimbel. I always go back to let's see, who else have I been? I feel like to be honest, like the things that I've been like kind of digging more into recently in terms of like, okay, I'm going to like listen to this to like learn it and practice it. I've been listening to a lot more like guitar players recently. I think just because like I spent so many years being like super fiddle focused that it's been really nice to kind of like apply some different vocabulary onto the fiddle and also be able to transfer it to guitar as well, because so I've been kind of getting into that lately.
Yeah. I saw the Bela Fleck tour, I don't know, a year, 2 years ago, and Michael Cleveland was touring with him, and he's kind of a force, isn't he? I'm just like, certainly. Oh my gosh, what is happening here? I mean, just such an incredible player.
Yeah, he's incredible. He's super sweet too. I've gotten to play a little bit with him, and he's really incredible. Just very, very heart forward person.
Yeah, really good. Mm-hmm. So after high school, you went and did the American Roots program at Berklee?
I did. Yeah, which luckily I found out about through the Mark O'Connor program that the fiddle camp. So yeah, like I was very lucky to be able to land there. It's a super cool program.
What is the track through that? Are you doing music theory? Are you doing all of that stuff as well, and then playing in ensembles? What's a typical week like for going through that program?
Yeah, so it's technically like a minor program. So, you do all your like normal college stuff in the sense that like you got your gen eds and you've got your music theories, you've got like jazz theory, you've got classical theory, you've got ear training, you've got conducting, you've got all that stuff. But But then for the Roots program, it's great because you get to take one-on-one individual lessons with like guest artists that come in. So that would be with people like Bruce or Jeremy Kittle, or who else would be there? Just like these kind of like legendary folks that would come in um, and like got to learn quite a bit with Joe K. Walsh and Daryl Anger, and Matt Glazer was like one of my main mentors there for quite a long time. And then you are like specifically in American Roots focus, what's it called? Ensembles as well, so like you do old time ensemble, you do bluegrass ensemble, you can do, like modern string band or 21st century string band stuff where you're whatever, like arranging some Billy Contreras thing or something. So yeah, that's kind of what it's like.
Wow. How many other musicians are in that program? Is it
Oh
a
man.
large program?
I mean, it's probably larger now than it was when I was there. It was kind of newish while I was there. I think it started in like '08 or something, and I got there in 2012. So I mean, I bet there was like maybe, I bet there were maybe like 60
Oh wow.
people that were like ambiently involved, maybe like 60 to 100 people that were like ambiently involved. And then maybe like 20 to 30 kids who were like really involved.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that
Yeah,
would give you a large pool of people you get to play with, but at the same time, there's enough consistency that you really get to zero in on some things with some consistent ensembles.
totally. And I guess I'm realizing in this conversation, like, yeah, one of the things that I just value the most in my peers and the people that I like end up being around is when people are like really hungry to learn and really hungry and earnest in their participation in whatever they're doing. And yeah, everybody was just really into it, generally speaking, or at least like
Yeah.
the friends that I made were like, and it was so great to be part of this cohort of people who were like, and we all lived together. We all lived in like this big house together and stuff. So, you like hear everybody practicing and, you get to be like, oh, well, what did you practice today? And like, what did you practice today? And then there's like a little bit of healthy competition to it as well, which can be rough sometimes, but was really good for me. So yeah, it was great.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I went to Belmont 100 years ago, so
Mm.
I understand that just the it is so valuable just being around people that inspire you and people that in a healthy way make you want to just get better at what you're doing, and
Right.
it's amazing.
Oh, totally. And like, luckily, there was like, it was good for me to be in that program because it was good to like do some serious thinking about like what is the purpose behind trying to be good. Because, in like some earlier scenes I had been in, it was like, well, if you're trying to be good, it's like because you're trying to like, it would be like in some scenes, it's like an ego forward thing, where you're like, well, I want people to know that I'm good. And luckily for me, within this scene, it very much seemed like I want to be good, not because, I mean, a little bit because I want to be good, but more so because like I want to be an active community member. And when I'm in a jam, I want to be able to call tunes that everybody can have fun playing. I want to be able to like support other people so that they have fun playing music with me and vice versa. And like, I overall feel like that's why people wanted to be good, that I was around, not because it's like I get to be fancy playing music.
Well, and I'm sure it was setting you up for success if you're having your own bands now or you're hiring your own musicians to be able to not only support them but to be able to communicate as
Hmm.
to what you're wanting from someone, like, so let's say for example this new project that you've done, just being able to communicate those creative needs that you're wanting from the people that are playing on it. I mean, I'm sure a lot of that was
Hmm.
developed in those moments where you're sitting with your colleagues at Berklee.
Totally. Well, and actually, yeah. So this record, each machine that I just made, I really only made it. There's really only one other person on that record, with the exception of one. There's one tune where I had some percussion overdubs done, but it's mostly me and my friend Isa Burke, who I adore, and she and I met the first week of Berklee, and we met in the downstairs of my dorm. And she and I were sort of like always doing the same stuff. We were kind of like always in the same classes, always taking this, we were like always like each other's little doppelgangers, and so it was really, really fun to collaborate on this project because we've known each other for so long and we have such a commonality of musical knowledge that there was actually like so little communicating that had to happen between us. Like, I think I did develop the tool to be able to communicate it with other people, but like with Issa, like she can just kind of read my mind at this point and vice versa. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, the new album. So it's released. It releases in December, I believe, right? December 6th. It's releasing, and
yes.
So for everyone that's listening, can you like walk us through how did all of that happen? Because it's one of the things when I read about it, my immediate thought was, why did it take so long for someone to do an album like this? I think it's such an amazing concept.
Thank you. I'm so glad you feel that way. Okay. So here's the story behind each machine. So during, I'm a professional musician. That's the whole deal. But during the pandemic, when touring slowed down and wasn't happening, and I was kind of going through some life changes and I like needed a little bit of a change of pace. So I started working, taking on some freelance work in like the podcasting industry and also in the documentary industry. And so during 2023, I was hired as a researcher and a writer to be researching. I can't even believe it now still, but I was researching the Satanic Panic of the 1980s. I was researching the Salem witch trials. I was researching the blood libel panic cases from, they happened throughout like the 1200s through the 1400s in Europe. And then also like the origins of Satan in the New Testament and also QAnon. And so basically the project was like learning about all of these different moral panics that have happened throughout the course of time. And it was as you might guess, like some pretty heavy subject matter.
Sure.
And it really was like a year-long process of me doing all of this research. And it's kind of funny because, I'm doing this research for somebody else's project. I'm like handing this research over, but it's like pretty fundamentally changing my own worldview, changing my own relationship to these, ideas of panic and resistance and light and love and God and the devil and, all of this, and how it relates not just to the past, but to what we're currently going through right now, and how it relates to our current political situation, which is fraught with panic and fraught with misinformation. And so as, my research kind of concluded for that project, and towards the end of it, I was like, I think I need to like make my own project out of this. And so I decided to make this album of folk music. So this is like mostly, with the exception of one song, it's almost all traditional music that I have learned through being in the bluegrass and old time communities. And it's songs that I've a lot of them have kind of been like indified and like vibed out, and there's electric guitars and, like washy stuff. But then there's also a lot of found audio from, different political speeches that have happened throughout time, and, different interviews that I did with people throughout my year researching these things. And yeah, so that's the story of each machine. It's basically me having a concerted place for me to like put all my feelings about all my research that I had been doing.
Well, and it's like I said, I kind of chuckled to myself thinking, yeah, I can't believe that it took someone this long to have this idea. It's such a
Mm-hmm.
brilliant idea, but the timing of it couldn't be any better, I think, to come
Mm-hmm.
out, because you're right. The days in which we're living, right? It's so it's a crazy world we're living in. I don't know if you noticed that, but you know,
Does seem to be that way.
I do. I just think it's and the origin of it. You doing the research. I remember. I've listened to some things about and I was a kid in the '80s, but I remember what was there was like some preschool that this whole thing went down.
Yeah, the McMartin
Oh,
preschool in
the
Manhattan
McMartin.
Beach, California. Yeah.
It's the craziest story I think I've ever heard in my
Mm.
life. Like,
Yeah.
what is happening? Yeah.
Totally. So for listeners who are unfamiliar with the McMartin preschool case, essentially what happened is there was a preschool in California where there was one mother who noticed her child acting sort of strangely, and she, you know, essentially like asked some very leading questions, and like the child gave some sort of like not wrong, but like misleading information. And this mother had a bit of a panic and thought that one of the employees had been sexually abusing her child. Which, is something that, like, if you were a parent, like, obviously that's something you want to be like very on the ball with, and that's not something to take lightly. Um, but unfortunately, in this particular case, it was not true. But then, like, the FBI got involved. The FBI sent out some misleading information. Like, a snowball situation happened where all of a sudden everybody was asking their kids like misleading questions about like if they had been abused, and it basically like ruined the lives of these preschool teachers. And yeah, they like did all these excavations looking for, they thought that like the devil was involved. They thought there was satanic sacrifice going on. They thought there was human sacrifice going on. They were like digging in the backyard looking for bones and things like that. And there was never any evidence, and none of it ever ended up being true. But it was the most expensive court case. I don't want to misspeak and say it of all U.S. history, but certainly of California history.
Yeah. And if memory serves, it's like every time that the children would tell the story, it just got bigger and bigger and just more absurd, right?
Yeah.
Because either being asked misleading questions or feeling the pressure to say as much to the adults that were asking the questions, and it just like you said, it just snowballed from there. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting making this record that is like, it's, like all of the songs and like all of the emotions behind it. It's about all these like very, very dark periods of human history, and some of our worst impulses. But I really tried to not make the music be like I don't think the experience of listening to the music of the album like feels like dour necessarily, or like I think I hope it's thought producing and like thought invoking, but not necessarily like, like a painful experience for
No,
everyone.
not at all. No, and I listened to it from front to back several times, and if anything, I would say that there's a tone of hope underneath it more than
Certain, yeah.
this bleak, ominous thing that in the connotation of the content, right? No, I would say that it's coming from a place of optimism. At least that's the way I heard it, you know.
I'm so glad it translates that way, because that's certainly where I was coming from. Like, kind of my whole point of this is like, within the Satanic Panic, within the Blood Libel panics, within early New Testament work, like within all of these things, within QAnon stuff, like people will over and over and over utilize demonization language, right? We'll like utilize or invoke the devil when it's something that we're scared of, when it's something that or when we know somebody in our communities that we want to otherize, when we want to atomize our own communities, things like that. And so that's why there is so much like devil imagery going on within this, within this project. But like, it's not, the whole point was thinking about like, okay, well, we have to think about our worst impulses if we want to deal with them. We have to think about like, okay, not just like, okay, well, what is my neighbor doing wrong? What are they doing wrong? What have they been doing? But like, what am I doing to be helpful? What am I doing to be like part of the solution rather than like contributing to panic around me? And like, how can I keep a level head when there's not necessarily like accurate information around? And I don't think anybody is immune from panic. I think like, things are going to happen, and like, we're not machines. But I do think that like I hold great optimism for our abilities to handle our demons, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah. No, I totally agree. What and just to chat about the I guess the technical part of it all. What all did you play? What were your instruments that you played
I
on this
played
album?
I played almost everything on this album. Me and Issa, we
Because
like switched back and forth. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, because I hadn't read any liner notes on it, so I assumed there was a pretty large personnel on it, and it's really cool to hear
That's
that it's like
funny.
two people.
It's two people. Yeah, it's two
Yeah.
people. And then my friend Pele Greenberg overdubbed some percussion on Leela, which is the next single that
Okay.
comes out. But yeah, I am playing acoustic guitar, electric guitar. I play the fiddle. I sing. I play percussion. I play drum set. I play the orchestral chimes. I play synthesizers. I play accordion. I play jaw harp. Um, yeah, like it really was like me and Issa just got all of these instruments in one room. And then for one song, there was like Venezuelan cuatros on a few songs. We just got all these instruments in a room, and we were like, okay, like let's just switch back and forth and like, just have fun.
That's great. Yeah, it's really good. It's exciting, and it does, it certainly takes you on a journey, right? And it goes. I really enjoy just the pacing of it, and the track listing, the order in the tracks. I think it works really well with the story that it's telling. What
Thanks.
was the
Thanks.
what was the process of? And I know you did the research for the project you were speaking of earlier, the podcast. But what was the
Mhm.
process of curating the songs that you picked that wound up being on the project?
Well, it really was. I had been like, I had been watching this movie called The Wicker Man. Have you watched it before?
I think I've seen that. I don't
Yeah.
remember.
So it's like this pretty out there film, not gonna lie. But it's a horror movie, the horror suspense sort of that was made in I guess England in the 70s, and it's like sort of avant-garde and a little abstract, and you kind of feel like you're on drugs the whole time you're watching it. But there's an amazing soundtrack that is all trad music. Um, and and the point of the movie is all about this outsider comes to an island and is trying to find a missing person, and it's the process of this island is essentially like a pagan island, and this man who comes is like a very God-fearing Christian man. And the movie is all about basically the process of like this outsider coming into like a pagan ritual, and then there's like a human sacrifice at the end of the movie. It's pretty freaky, but the soundtrack is amazing. And so part of me trying to cultivate like what songs were going to be on this was I was like, okay, I want to be like sort of inspired by the mood of the soundtrack of The Wicker Man, which Summer Is a Coming In is like from that movie. I mean, it's an old medieval song, but it was featured on that movie in The Wicker Man. And then I was just like thinking, kind of racking through my like arsenal of traditional songs that I have listened to and sung and played in jam sessions and late night campfires, thinking about like, okay, what are the songs that I know that are about the devil, that are about God, that are about your relationship to like the earth and, not just the earth, but like our responsibility to the earth. And yeah, that's how I started thinking about how to find these songs. And then the only song that is not a traditional, like folk song is the very last track is A Perfect World, which I wrote that one, but the lyrics are a poem by this poet named David Keeg. And so that's the only exception. That's an original song.
Wow. Yeah, it's and I just encourage everyone to just be ready for this. Be ready, December 6th. It's and you released one single so far, right?
Yes. One
Yeah.
single is out. The Devil's Nine Questions came out last week. Very excited about that.
Yes.
Um,
And then you
yeah,
have
so you can listen to that now.
more singles to be released before the full album.
Yeah, so there will be one more single before the full album release. Leela is coming out on, oh boy, October. I should know this off the top of my head. I think it's October 28th. Yeah, October 29th. Leela is coming out. And then we're taking like a little bit of a break during November because I think people will have some other election-y feelings going on.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and
Yeah.
then the so then the full album will be out on December 6th. And I'm also there's vinyls available to pre-order now, and I also have written a zine of essays that will come, like if you order the vinyl, like it'll come with the zine of essays about some of my experiences and some of my interviews and things like that I did throughout the course of the year, and also some photography from the year as well.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I noticed that that a vinyl pre-order was available, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be doing that. So
Okay.
yeah, and I will make sure to put all of those links in the show notes, so everyone, please go check those out. Please order, and it's just great stuff. I'm really just blown away with it all, and your songwriting too. The other stuff I've listened, we've been talking so much about all of this. I didn't even get to talk to you yet about the songwriting part of it, because that's another huge thing that you're so wonderful at it, and singers and instrumentalists, and but then this whole other thing of you as a songwriter. When has that been in the mix from the beginning, or is that something you picked up along the way?
I've always wanted to be a songwriter, but I didn't really like get the cojones to really do it until I was in a band called the Page Turners for a while a few years ago. And like, that's when I started songwriting was during that project. But yeah, it's been this thing that I've like really wanted to be part of my musical identity. And I kind of think of myself as a songwriter first, and then maybe like an instrumentalist second, and all these other, but yeah, this is maybe some insider knowledge. I just got finished recording a new album of all original songs, which will hopefully be out next year.
Hey,
So,
that's great.
yeah, so I have no idea like when exactly yet, because I literally like they're not even mixed yet, but I am excited about that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, just a fan of of everything you do. I really am, and I'm an instrumentalist and a singer, and it's easy to kind of zero in on that and really focus on it. But the songs, just the content of the material, I'm just really blown away with what you do. Really good stuff.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, I'm so glad to meet you, and this was like been such a lovely conversation, and I hope we get to meet in real life,
Yes.
or at least like in real person at some point.
I know.
And yeah, thank you so much. This has been such a thoughtful conversation. It's been lovely.
Yeah, thank you. And your website, carolynkendrick.com, and you
That's
can go
it.
and find out dates. You can pre-order the new album. You can find out all sorts of cool information about you. And yeah, I just encourage everyone to go and check it out. Carolyn, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today.
Hey, ditto. Can't wait till the next one.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the Bandwich Tapes. I'm your host, Brad Williams. The show's theme is called Playcation and was written by Mark Mundy. Drop me a line at the email address, thebandwichtapes@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe to receive new episodes of the podcast. And while you're at it, please tell someone else about the show. Thanks for listening.